Hello, grade 5 teachers, and welcome to the May Pacing Guide overview. I am your elementary social studies consultant, Samantha Davidson. Please reach out to me at samantha.davidson@ecsd.net or via Teams. I'm happy to help and support with all the upcoming projects in May or any understanding of the curriculum. Looking forward to working with you, and I can come and model in classes anything that we're talking about here on the Pacing Guide or work through some other project planning ideas if you would like. So let's get into it. So for the month of May, we're kind of finishing up events and factors that have changed the way in life of Canada over time. Again, we are looking at the verbs. We are assessing critically those specific events, and this time the change the famous five brought about into Canada. So, of course, we want to know who were the famous five, how did they identify a need for change in Canada, and how did the changes brought on by the actions affect the individual rights in Canada. So, who, what, why, when, and kind of are the idea there. Now, it's important to note that the curriculum, obviously, as we know, is quite a bit old, and there have been in the past a lot of research projects done with the famous five. Again, those are skills and procedures we're developing, which is great. But it is important to note that most research now, when you look up the famous five, do bring in the multiple perspectives. So again, the understanding of racism within the ideologies of famous five and things like that. So really be cautious when asking students just to go out and look for the information. Even when looking on the Canadian Encyclopedia, for example, that is historically accurate information. So if you are giving that research project, just make sure that you know that that is going to be something that comes up and something that the students might talk about within their research. Again, historically accurate, so nothing wrong if they have that information. Just probably something to be aware of that has changed since kind of the inception of this curriculum. So I tend to look at the famous five as again a case study. So looking at suffragette, looking at the right to vote, looking at the history of the right to vote, and all those included in who were refused the right to vote over time. So just a piece of clarification there and just a little bit of know-how in case you weren't quite sure there. Then we're moving into economics. So we're moving out of the historical strand and we're truly moving into understanding economics and the history of economics within Canada that has affected and changed the ways of life. So when you're looking at economics, it's important for students to understand that economic cycle. So truly they started learning about economics in about grade 2 when looking at how do the natural resources lead to job opportunities and things like that. So, but it's hard for students to kind of have made that connection. So in grade 5, they're really truly understanding. So I would bring back understanding from the Canadian regions when we looked at all the different natural resources and then all of the job opportunities for them to understand that, okay, when we have resources, then we can have goods and services. When you have goods and services, we have job opportunities. When we have job opportunities, we have a revenue stream. When we have a revenue stream, so that cycle and how that goes. And there's some resources in there to help you. Because truly, when you're looking at the outcomes, we are not looking at World War One. We're not looking at the event World War One. We're looking specifically at how the events of World War One contributed to industrialization and urbanization of Canada. So how did this event force the migration and movement of people away from farming communities into cities? So what was the occurrence of there? Or what happened? What was the event? Mainly, of course, the need for new technologies and things like that, and people going off to war and women needing to fill roles in the cities and things like that. So again, lots of resources to support you there, but it's about the economics of all of that. And then we're going to jump into a different economic event where we're looking at the Great Depression. So yes, they need to understand, the nuances and the facts and the acquire the information of what the Great Depression was and what was life was like at that time. But again, looking at how did this drive people away from that rural living into the cities? What were the draws? What were that cause and effect? So truly, with this economics, we're looking at cause and effect. So what was the cause that drove people through the Great Depression to urbanization? And then we're looking at the Second World War again in its economic. So how did its economic boom follow that Second World War? So how did the Second World War event cause an economic boom here in Canada. So that's what we're looking at specifically, those economic outcomes. So students need to understand the cycle of economics first, and then understand how these specific events affected those different things. And of course, it would be great to bring in some current events here. What are some events, recent events, contemporary events that have impacted economics in Canada? So again, we can talk about COVID-19. We can talk about those types of things. We can talk about the housing crisis and things that are occurring right now to kind of shape and help students to underline that. So great opportunities for some current events with this within May as well. Again, within our skills, developing those skills of critical and creative thinking. So we do want them to analyze significant local and current affairs from a variety of sources. Distinguishing between fact and opinion is also important. But when we're looking at local and current events, we don't necessarily want to just who, what, where, when, and why. We want to analyze them. So we want to look at what effect does this have on people. Continuing to evaluate our own ideas, reevaluate ideas, when we receive more information. We are looking at historical context here, so continuing to develop historic thinking. Again, research process is another one that we can put in here, and we want to continue to develop the skills of oral, written, and visual literacy. So we do have some terms here for you that students will need to kind of know depending on what resources you use. These are kind of based off of the specific outcomes. So when we're looking at visible thinking routines, trying to understand that critical thinking from multiple points of view, circle of viewpoints, I used to think, but now I think, here, now, then, there, and parts, people, and interaction. Parts, people, and interaction are really, really great for systems thinking. And when we think about economics, it truly is falling under that systems thinking. So what are the people? What are the parts, and how do they interact when it comes to urbanization in regards to the Great Depression? Again, want to continue using different reading comprehension strategies. I always recommend that what you're doing in language arts should be mimicked in social studies if you can with the nonfiction text or with the text that are going to be provided. So skimming and scanning is important. Summarizing. TQE is going to be important. Looking at text structure, looking at cause and effect, understanding that is going to be really important. So student activities, we have a timeline creation. So we have activism of the famous five. So they can create a timeline. There are some lesson and activities here created by Famous Five, which is a website that's linked. When we're looking and moving to urbanization, why are people moving to cities is a great geography kids crash course. So you may have used this one when looking at immigration as well. Why do people move? It really helps to support the understanding of what urbanization really means and economic factors. Then we have finance and war production from the Canadian War Museum. And if you are looking to do an extension, your students are super interested in learning about the World Wars. Through the Canadian War Museum, you can get what's called a war artifact box, and they will ship it out to you, and then inside is going to be a bunch of museum artifacts along with lesson plans, placards that you could set up, so you can essentially set up a museum in your classroom where students can actually try on uniforms and things like that to deepen that. So that's through the Canadian War Museum. Lots of different cause and effect graphic organizers. Then we're going to look at economics. So there's a video there that's going to help support students with that basic understanding of economics. And then there's going to be the Kayak magazine to help support that. Please continue to use cooperative learning structures in your class, inside, outside circles, chat stations, fan and pick, Socratic seminars. If you have any questions or concerns, or you're wondering, how do I implement these in the class? I want to see it done first. More than happy to come out and share a lesson with your students using visible thinking routines, looking at cooperative learning strategies, looking at how we can really get them engaged in some of the timeline creation, some of the tech behind timeline creation. Please feel free to reach out. Or if you're just like, oh, I have a really interesting idea, we can chat about it. We can build some resources and we can plan together. So again, when we're looking at our pacing guide, we have conversations, observations, and products. Here are some really great conversation questions that you can have with students to really specifically look at those outcomes that we have there. All right, so in the Canadian Encyclopedia, we do have Famous Five plain language summary. So this is, appropriate for some of your readers. Again, it will have those pieces in there. So just be aware that, it does talk about racism and things like that, that the Famous Five engaged in throughout their journey. We have an industrialization Canadian encyclopedia, urban and industry, Canadian War Museum, teacher resources, all these different kind of websites that you can go to. Uh, Kayak Magazine has also started creating videos called History Bites. So again, we have one for No Votes for Men, which surrounds the Famous Five or the women's suffrage. And then we also have one of Dust and Depression. And then we have a ton of Kayak magazines to help support these outcomes. So again, we have Women Can Finally Vote for Famous Five, Great Canadian Women, The Great War, Remembering the Great War, Disaster Strikes looks at the Dust and Depression as well, and Life at Home during Second World War. So I hope you find lots of resources in here that you can use and lots of support. If you need any additional support, like I said, you can reach out to me on Teams, email me at samantha.davidson@ecsd.net. Lots of resources on the SharePoint page that you can go see, and of course there is a targeted support form you can fill out to have me come out to your classroom as well. So hope you enjoy the month of May, and thank you so much for watching.